You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Stay with us. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed stated in an issued statement that the government of Ethiopia has established a national committee to coordinate its anti-corruption campaign. The premier noted that the establishment of the committee that corruption has currently become a threat to the security of the nation. The newly established committee will bring the culprits of corruption before court of law by distinguishing the actors in addition to those who had already been identified through study. The premier also mentioned about the efforts being carried out by the government to prevent the act of corruption by scrutinizing government structures and putting in place new systems supported by technologies. Efforts have also been made to prosecute government officials and other actors who are engaged in crimes of corruption, the premier stated. However, the study report revealed that people who thought the war and COVID-19 that the country encountered has taken the attention of the government have been engaged in activities to destroy Ethiopia by creating network. Hence, the findings of the study and the evaluation of public discussions indicate the need for the government to undertake a strong and decisive operation on acts of corruption, just like it did on the security matters. On the one hand, Abiy underscored that the government will work to eliminate laws, regulations, guidelines and procedures that are vulnerable to corruption, adding it will also intensify its efforts to expose corrupt actors and bring them to justice. Furthermore, the premier indicated that the government is conducting an investigation on government officials, employees of government institutions, bribe givers and bribe takers. However, corruption is carried out in a sophisticated way, using technologies and sometimes under the cover of law, he said. Therefore, the government has established a national committee to coordinate its anti-corruption campaign. The Ethiopian government has been announcing that it is working to combat structural corruption. Briefing lawmakers consecutively in the past 4 years, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been calling on all Ethiopians to play their fair share to fight corruption. National Anti-Corruption Committee has been established to overcome the deep-rooted corruption in government structures. Goshu Melliso has compiled the following account.
Since the advent of the reform, the government has been expressing corruption is a threat for the development of the country. According to government data, there are some officials in government structures committing theft and fattening their pockets. Addressing the parliament 4 years ago, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said corruption is ramped up across the nation.
Corruption is like cancer that drugs the country's development. It has become an instrument for oppressing the poor people and looting national property. The main reason corruption is said to be the thieves' government is that corrupted people use corruption to twist the hands of the government to enforce what they want. Corruption is not only theft, but also corrupted people act as the government to satisfy their injustice. Corruption is not given to some groups. It is widening across the nation.
The government has been warning corruptors to refrain from their evil action, believing that breaking the strong chain stretched from government structures to brokers is a big task.
ሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ የቁልቁለት ጉዞ
The main reasons for the country's downward journey are theft and revenge. Some innocent officials hate and fight against corruption here and there. We should replicate and enlarge the number of these people to fight and reduce corruption.
Similarly, 8 months ago, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed told the parliamentarians few individuals who hate corruption or theft would be swamped by organized corrupted officials. He stressed that maladministration which paves the way for bribery should be corrected to prevent corruption.
Malfunctioning system creates bribes. Similarly, a bribe giver creates a bribe receiver. Bribery creates maladministration. It is a vicious circle.
Although efforts have been made to fight corruption, it remains a challenge for the government due to lack of an organized system. It is to be recalled that the government called all Ethiopians to work hand in hand to battle corruption.
We have established a national anti-corruption committee and an investigation is being carried out on government officials, public servants, bribers and recipients. I urge the House of People's representatives and all Ethiopians to collaborate with the committee to bear fruit and at least to reduce corruption.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced the establishment of National Anti-Corruption Committee in which 7 members are included to fight the entrenched system of corruption.
In today's episode, I met the ambassador of Islamic Republic of Iran.
Historical point of view and historical background of our bilateral relation, which goes back to 2,500 years ago.
So how do Iran observe this peace process?
We can work in different fields, taking in account Iran's progress in, especially in the sophisticated, high-tech, important technologies.
Currently, what are major areas you are cooperating with Ethiopia?
Biotechnology, nanotechnology, you know, in all that cyber science, nuclear science, spatial science, they are even military science. As Iran, we don't interfere in the internal issue of any countries.
Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister Demeke Mekonnen held discussion with the Special Envoy of the European Union for the Horn of Africa, Annette Weber, about the peace agreement and regional issues in his office. During the discussion, Demeke said that the Ethiopian government worked hard to reach a peace agreement because of its desire to resolve the problem in the north peacefully. He also noted that the government is committed to the implementation. He expressed that humanitarian aid is being made available to the areas affected by the conflict and explained that the work of provision of basic services is gaining momentum. In addition, he stated that the government will hold political consultations with the relevant parties to solve the security problems in some part of the country, and discussions will be held on various agendas at the National Dialogue Forum. Demeke also called on partners to strengthen their cooperation in the phase of implementation of the agreement and recovery of areas affected by conflict. The Special Envoy Annette Weber expressed her appreciation for the historic agreement. She also stated that the European Union will play its part in the implementation of the agreement and reconstruction. The Ethiopian National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Committee, led by the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen, set directions for provision and accessibility of humanitarian aid to affected areas in the northern part of Ethiopia. In its emergency meeting, the committee assessed that the number of citizens that need humanitarian assistance due to man-made and natural disasters in the country is high. Stating that the number of citizens displaced from their homes due to drought, flood, and conflict is also high, the committee stressed that it needs prior attention and the collaboration of all citizens. Chairperson of the committee, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen, said that the government is delivering humanitarian aid to citizens who have been displaced due to conflict and are in need of support in Tigray, Afar, Amhara states, and other areas. He further stressed the need to support those citizens to sustainably rehabilitate those affected by the conflict.
Ethiopia, a country located in the eastern horn part of Africa, has been known by its different culture, history, and tradition.
animal fossils were discovered from here. And then this is south of Addis Ababa.
Just read a book by Peter Ward about life on Earth, including speaking of some of the excavations have been done in this country and in Afar.
There are lots of animal fossil which was discovered from the different, parts of Ethiopia.
I find it incredible, being able to see your history, your culture. And it's not only a place for Ethiopian history, it's a place for human history,
And I think for the foreigners must be busy to learn about the Ethiopian culture and Ethiopian peoples to be happier based on the history. So this will be wonderful.
When I first heard of Lucy, I questioned, I said, how is it possible that she's an African woman and they call her Lucy? My name is Bernetia. My mother is an African woman. She would not have given me a Euro name.
The best country, which is man-made as well as natural one.
The government of Ethiopia resumed the partial privatization of Ethio Telecom and issued invitations for expression of interest to foreign investors to buy 40% of the state-owned operator. The statement went on to say that the Ethiopian government is still committed to finishing the privatization process and that it plans to reconnect with both old and new business partners. Kasahun Chane has the following story.
The Ministry of Finance recalled the government had established guidelines for the privatization of public farms as part of its homegrown economic reform initiative. It said the goal was to strengthen the private sector's contribution to the Ethiopian economy and boost public farms' productivity, competitiveness, and access to capital while raising the quality and accessibility of the offerings. According to this program, the government has suggested selling 40% of the equity share capital of Ethio Telecom to privatize the corporation partially. Finance Minister Ahmed Shide stated during a media briefing on the invitation for expression of interest that the government is now prepared to interact with potential bidders to privatize 40% of Ethio Telecom's share after carefully evaluating market circumstances. Look.
With the successful liberalization process of the telecom sector that saw the market entrance of Safaricom and its partners, the partial privatization of Ethio Telecom aims to create a competitive and diverse telecom sector to achieve the digital transformation plan of the country. In March 2022, the government decided to postpone the partial privatization transaction after consultation with several telecom companies who showed their interest to participate in the tendering process with the environment of adverse development in the domestic and international market. After a careful consideration of the market conditions and a very stable outlook currently of the country, with the signing of the agreement to end hostilities in the northern part of Ethiopia, the government is now ready to engage with prospective bidders to partially privatize 40% of Ethio Telecom's share.
With the release of the expression of interest, the government restarted the privatization process, allowing international enterprises to declare the interest.
Today, the government is reinstating the process with the launching of the expression of interest that will permit interested companies to express their interest. The government will be supported in this transaction by Deloitte Consulting Limited, which will be the transaction advisor representing the government. The document related to expression of interest will be available in the website of the Ministry of Finance, and expression of interest will be open until December 19th, 2022. Today, we are also announcing that the Ethiopian Communications Authority will be initiating a stakeholder consultation to collect all interested stakeholders' contributions regarding the issuance of the third telecommunication operation license.
The minister said Deloitte Consulting Limited, who will serve as the transaction advisor for the government, will support the government in this transaction. Government's plan to transform the telecom sector is intended to create a world-class telecom industry and strengthen the nation's digital economy, according to Job Takalling, State Minister of Finance, who also stated during a same briefing that the partial privatization of Ethiopian Telecom and the beginning of a stakeholder consultation process for the third telecommunication operating license are both parts of that plan. The Ethiopian Communication Authority Director General Baltaraba, for his part, also said the third telecom's operating license stakeholder engagement process will last 4 months, and all interested bidders are welcome to participate. The statement added that the Ethiopian government is still dedicated to concluding the privatization process and anticipates re-engaging with existing and new companies who've shown interest in a request for proposals in due course.
Ethiopia has started selling electricity to neighboring Kenya this November. The energy deal between the two countries has 3 phases. It is stated that the Ethio-Kenya 500 kilovolt transmission line, which officially started power transmission today, has a potential to generate up to $100 million in revenue annually. The transmission line has a capacity to transmit up to 2,000 megawatts of electricity to countries from Kenya to Tanzania and to South Africa. The Ethio-Kenya 500 kilovolt power transmission line and converter substation has started selling electricity to Kenya. It is recalled that Ethiopia is at the moment earning over $100 million annually from selling electricity to neighboring Djibouti and Sudan. And finally, President of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, has called for the use of natural gas resource in Africa to complement its renewable energy. Fossil fuels deal agreement is among the key sticking points at the COP27 climate talks, and some nations are pushing for fossil fuels to be phased out. Tegusa Nisa has the detail.
The right of African countries to use their natural gas resources should be reflected in any deal at the COP27 climate talks, the President of African Development Bank has said. Agreeing a deal on fossil fuels is a key sticking point at the talks. Sources say some countries, including India, are keen to phase down the use of all such fuels, including gas. But African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina said natural gas is needed to balance out the energy supply given the intermittent nature of renewables.
Even if Africa uses all of its natural gas for power, you know how much it will contribute to emissions? 0.67. That's all. So Africa must have natural gas to complement its renewable energy to assure access, affordability, and security of power supply.
The world is currently on course to miss its climate goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average by mid-century. Because of that, one focus at the conference has been on countries accelerating their shift to renewable energy. Adesina said the special nature of Africa with the highest level of energy poverty in the world had to be recognized.
When it comes to the issue of gas, the African Development Bank, we are the leader on this continent on renewable energy. We are putting 85% of our resources into renewable energy generation. But I recognize that renewables are very highly variable in terms of supply, so you got to make sure you have a balanced energy grid.
A preliminary document from COP27's hostess arrived late on Monday. It made no mention of fossil fuels. While the document forms the basis of any agreement, the all-important final wording has yet to be hammered out.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Here's the story making headline. Government establishes National Committee to coordinate anti-corruption campaign.